the news coverage of like the last day is just, to me, it's being taken up with these issues that are like kind of related to this whole Russia investigation thing, which to me personally at this point is kind of like this non-issue that's being blown up into this gigantic thing. I mean, look, I'll be the first one to say, if somebody presents me with like really solid evidence that the Trump administration was trying to help Russia and hurt America, or the Trump administration was like coordinating with the Russian government to like release leaks about Hillary Clinton or something like that, well, fine, then I'll say something like, then I'll be on board with saying, wow, that's a really serious thing. But I've seen no evidence to that effect, and I don't think anyone's seen any in public has seen any evidence to that effect. So we just have like this giant conspiracy theory that's going on and on and on. But in the last couple days, it's just like, it's like the only thing anyone's talking about, like in the news and in like the media, in like the mainstream media. Like, look at the big stories today, like both on like CNN and MSNBC and like, you know, like major papers, you know, like the New York Times and the Washington Post. What are the stories? Well, one story, this Devin Nunes thing, to me, when this came out, I saw it as like, okay, it's a story and I could see it ending up being important, but right now it's kind of like this fuzzy technical matter and no one's going to really care. It's become the biggest deal in the world to everyone whether Devin Nunes excuses himself from the Russia investigation of the House Intelligence Committee. So just to backtrack a little bit, let me see if I can summarize this briefly. It's hard to do, but I'll try to summarize it briefly. I'm so sick of it already. Devin Nunes last week said, hey, I have some information from a source about this intelligence that was collected and distributed widely in the government. And this intelligence involves surveillance reports, either surveillance of or just surveillance reports about, that have information about President Trump and his associates. And it bothers me, Devin Nunes said, that this information, this surveillance information about President Trump and his associates is being spread so widely in the government, and I think that could be a problem. So I went to the White House and I told them this was happening. And then we have this sort of series of uproars in the media about this. First it was like, oh, he didn't tell the House Intelligence Committee before he went to the White House, and that's this huge deal. And then it was revealed last night that he got the information in the building on the White House grounds, and now this is like, oh, now this giant uproar is like, oh, he went to the White House to get this information, so it must be, which he didn't, he went to the building on the White House grounds, so it must be the case that like President Trump leaked him the information, although the White House denies that any White House officials gave him this information. So there's all this uproar, and like now this new uproar is like, well, he's got to excuse himself from leading the investigation, the House Intelligence investigation into the Russia involvement in our election. Now, one thing that's really bothering me about all this endless energy and print and time on air that's been spent on this story is like, it's all about like, it's like the biggest deal in the world to a lot of people in the media, whether Devin Nunes excuses himself from the House Intelligence Committee investigation into Russian involvement in the elections. Now, to me, I don't personally think that investigation is going to turn anything up anyway, because I have a hard time believing that the Trump campaign was like betraying America and trying to help Russia, or was like secretly plotting with the Russian government to like subvert the whole election process. To me, it seems kind of like a nutty conspiracy theory. Look, if I'm presented with evidence to the contrary, I'll be the first one to say, okay, you got the evidence now, but I haven't seen anything, and it just seems kind of unlikely. And nothing's turned up so far that's been made public. So my point is, this whole investigation, all this effort that's being spent on this investigating this stuff, I think there's a case to be made that like that's a giant waste of time. But now it's like a giant waste of time on top of a giant waste of time, which is time wasted worrying about and complaining about whether someone will excuse themselves from this investigation, where the investigation, I feel like, in itself is going to end up being a giant waste of time and also a giant distraction. I would much rather everyone just talk about more important issues like, okay, what should we do about health care if this health care bill isn't going to pass, which is not going to pass and was withdrawn? Is there anything else we can do about it? What should we do about tax reform? What should we do about an infrastructure bill? And that's so much effort, both by the media and also like a lot of Democrats too, is being spent on this. It bothers me as an American just because like I would like to see Democrats come out with work and release some proposals about what you'd like to see with like tax reform and infrastructure and the health care bill, you know, and just it just to me again to me it's like a giant waste of time about details about another giant waste of time. And it's not that this shouldn't be talked about at all, but it's like the number one story. Go turn on CNN or MSNBC or look at the New York Times today, or like the Washington Post or any of these outlets, and that's just one story. That's just one story. We also have this whole Jared Kushner story, which is like, oh, Jared Kushner is going to testify in front of the Senate because he met with some Russian officials during the interim between the election and President Trump taking office, which is like, okay, well, he was going to be one of the top people in the White House, so it's pretty normal, from what I understand, for top like people in the incoming administration to meet with, you know, representatives of foreign countries, and it's just like that to me is going to turn up nothing as well. And everybody's all talking about that. There was a third thing. Oh, and then this morning there was this whole thing again about the investigation related to that, which is like the Washington Post had this big story about how the White House told Sally Yates that she couldn't testify. They tried to prevent her from testifying to, I think it's the House Intelligence Committee, not the Senate Intelligence one, but the White House tried to prevent Sally Yates from testifying in this investigation. Like, and it's just, and the White House has come out and said, well, no, we didn't try to prevent her from testifying. Now, there's this letter out that the Washington Post had that said, where the White House says, well, some of the stuff she might say in this testimony could be covered by White House, like, privileged communications regulations, so she should check with us first before testifying. But that's not trying to prevent her from testifying. But anyways, it's another thing. Like the Kushner thing and the Sally Yates thing and the Devin Nunes thing, to me, they're just, it's like, again, I use the phrase giant waste of time about something that's just related to another giant waste of time. Ultimately, I don't think personally these investigations are going to turn up much. And now we're spending all this time arguing about these stories, not even the investigation, like stories about the investigation. It's just, oh, and I'm sorry I'm getting so upset this morning, but it's just like, it's just this constant. And it's nonstop. Go again, turn on your TV and look at the papers and stuff. And it's not even like, my upsetness is not like, oh, these are unfair charges, or oh, like the liberals are like attacking people unfairly. It's more just like, it's just all this energy and effort is being spent on these things that don't help the country at all and are a giant waste of time and aren't going to make a difference anyway. Like, I honestly don't think whether Sally Yates testifies or not, or whether some of her testimony, whether she can fully testify or has to like not say certain stuff because it's covered by White House privilege, I don't really think that's going to, and whether the White House, you know, whatever the White House said to her, I don't think that's really going to make a big difference in terms of what's found out about this Russia connection thing, because I don't really think there's much to be found out. Same with whether Devin Nunes heads the House Intelligence Committee investigation to this or not. It's not going to make a big difference. And it's just like, and it reminds me of like when everybody was all upset like for a few days about the biggest thing in the world for a few days was like Jeff Sessions should recuse himself from the Justice Department investigation into the Russian interference in the election. Like that was the biggest deal in the world. And then he finally just said, okay, I recuse myself, and we never heard about it again. But it's like that wasn't going to make a big difference either. And it's just all of this time and energy and all this media coverage is just on this stuff, which I don't think ultimately will amount to anything. And it's just time that like the media and like people and Democrats could be focused on like more important issues to our country. And fine, if they want to talk this stuff about a little and you want to write an article about it, fine. I'm not saying don't write anything about it, but it's just the sheer amount of time and effort and energy being put into this by everybody just seems like not. Who cares? Focus on stuff that's going to be more important for like Americans to be benefited by. You know, if Democrats want to spend all their time in the media talking about the issues, Now, they can feel free to disagree with the Trump administration about it, fine, but at least you're talking about like important issues that are going to affect Americans rather than like issues about an investigation that's ultimately not going to really make much of a difference at all. And personally, I think what's probably really driving this is that a lot of these people, both in the media and on the Democratic side, hate Trump so much that they this is like their one chance. It's like, if we can just show that he colluded with Russia on the election, then we can get him out of office or something. It just feels like at a certain point it all goes back to that, and that's why they spend all this time on this. But it doesn't really help the country to me. So, anyways. All right, that was a bit of a rant, but I'm kind of upset about it, and it just feels like, again, I'll say it again, a giant waste of time about a giant waste of time. So you know where I stand on all these stories today, and this is why I was saying I feel like it's going to be so much of Spicer press briefing is going to be the questions on the Devin Nunes and on the Kushners, on the Sally Yates, and it's just like, enough already. Oh my gosh. Driving me nuts.